You know, there's this one number that quietly runs our lives. It helps decide if you get that apartment, that car, or even that dream house. It's your credit score. But here's the thing. It's not some fixed number carved in stone. The rules behind it, the data that shapes it, well, they're always evolving. And right now, we're in the middle of one of the biggest changes yet.
So what if the very rule book for calculating that score got a massive rewrite? What if a huge chunk of the information that used to define your score just vanished? And what if the new systems that came in to replace it could see not just a snapshot of your finances, but a full-length movie of your financial habits? Well, you don't have to imagine it because that's exactly what's happening.
All right, here's our game plan. We're going to start with the score blueprint. Then we'll get into the mystery of the great data disappearance. After that, we'll meet the new scores on the block. We'll connect it all back to how your actions shape your score. And finally, we'll take a peek at the future of credit.
So before we can understand where all this is heading, we have to know where we're starting from. Let's break down the classic architecture of a credit score.
Okay, check this out. This is the traditional FICO model, the one that like 90% of top lenders still use. It's built on these 5 key pillars. And look at the weighting. A whopping 35% is just your payment history. It's simple. Do you pay your bills on time? But right on its heels at 30% is amounts owed. And this one's a little trickier because it's not just about how much you owe, but how much you owe compared to how much credit you have available.
And buried inside that huge amounts owed piece is probably the single most powerful tool you have to control your score, your credit utilization ratio. Seriously, this thing is a huge deal. It's basically the percentage of your credit limit you're using at any given time. The lower you can keep that number, the better off you're going to be.
All right, so we've got this system that's been in place for ages. Everyone understands the rules. But then, in 2017, the ground just shifted from under everyone's feet. A whole category of information that lenders depended on just, poof, disappeared.
Just take a look at this. This comes from the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. See those lines for judgment and lien? They don't just dip, they literally fall off a cliff. We're talking about millions of public records, things like tax liens and civil judgments, getting wiped clean from credit reports, seemingly overnight. This was a massive shock to the system. So what on earth happened? Was it some kind of glitch? Nope. It was totally intentional. It was all part of something called the National Consumer Assistance Plan, or NCAP, and it was all about improving accuracy. The new rules demanded that these public records meet way higher standards for verification. The problem? Most of the records just couldn't meet the new bar. So instead of being fixed, they were just removed.
So this creates a huge problem, right? I mean, if you're a lender and a whole bunch of risk indicators are suddenly gone from the reports you rely on, how do you do your job? How can you possibly figure out who's a good borrower and who's a risk? How do you adapt?
Well, a data vacuum like that couldn't last for long. It actually kicked off this huge wave of innovation, and it led to some of the most advanced, most sophisticated scoring models we have ever seen.
And that brings us to FICO 10. Now, there are a couple of versions, but the one you really need to pay attention to is FICO 10T. See that T? It stands for Trended. The standard FICO 10 is a solid update, but FICO 10T, well, it adds a whole new dimension to your story. It's a real game changer.
Okay, so what in the world is trended data? This is so important. Think of it this way. Your old credit score was like a single photograph, a snapshot of your balances on one random day of the month. Trended data is the whole movie, showing up to 24 months of your financial history. It lets lenders see your habits. Are you the person who pays off your card in full every month, or do you carry a balance? It shows the direction you're heading, your trajectory.
And you know, this evolution isn't just about getting more precise for the people who already have scores, it's also about being way more inclusive. VantageScore 4.0, another next-gen model, uses machine learning to score an estimated 40 million people who used to be called unscorable because their credit files were too thin. That is a massive, life-changing expansion of credit access.
So I know this all sounds very high level, algorithms, data models, the whole shebang. But it all connects directly back to you and the choices you make. Understanding these new rules gives you the power to actually manage and improve your score.
Let's circle back to that credit utilization ratio because it's so important. Just look at how powerful this is. The balance, the actual debt, is exactly the same in all 3 rows, $1,000. But look what happens when the total credit limit goes up. That utilization ratio plummets from a pretty risky 50% all the way down to an excellent 10%. This is exactly why paying down your balances, or even just getting a credit limit increase, can give your score such a massive boost.
So, if you're going to boil it all down, here are the 3 golden rules. First, keep that utilization low. Under 30% is a good target, but honestly, under 10% is where you really want to be. Second, build a healthy mix of credit over time, maybe a credit card and a small loan, to show you can handle different kinds of debt. And third, the absolute foundation of everything. Pay on time. Every single time. That 35% for payment history, it's still.
But the evolution doesn't stop with trended data. The system is still adapting, still changing to keep up with all the new ways we spend and borrow money today.
A perfect example of this is the boom in buy now, pay later services. You know, the ones you see at checkout everywhere? For the longest time, those little loans just existed in their own world, outside the traditional credit system. But that's changing. New FICO models are now being trained to pull that BNPL data in.
And that right there is the key takeaway for the future. The trend is moving toward a more complete, a more holistic view of your entire financial life. Pretty soon, making those 4 on-time payments for a new pair of shoes could actually help prove you're ready for a mortgage. The system is getting smarter, and it's looking at way more of your financial behavior to figure out if you're a good risk.
And that leaves us with one final thought. The world of credit isn't a static snapshot anymore. It's a dynamic, ongoing film of your financial journey. The models that score you are evolving to capture more and more of that story. So the real question is, are you making sure it's a story worth watching?